There definitely is no anime like Re:Zero. Re:Zero may not be my favorite anime of all time, but anytime it airs in a season, it's going to be one of my favorites airing, and the more I watch, the more I appreciate what White Fox has done with the second season, especially even more so with part 2. This show's exceptional, and from the gorgeous lighting that I think doesn't get enough credit, from the fires kind of like just burning away and the embers crackling as you have this amazing fight between Elsa as well as Garf, and obviously the sisters and everything like that, to then the sanctuary and the trials and this like really gorgeous, as if everything is mysterious and angelic, but at the same time you're not supposed to touch it, the blue lightings with these really interesting effects. The world and the atmosphere just perfectly sucks you in, and to have consistent 30-minute episodes where, yeah, sometimes the opening will play, sometimes the credits will be there, but nonetheless, White Fox doesn't waste your time. If it's saying you're going to have extra minutes in an episode of either dialogue, action, or just general scenery, it's there for a reason. Without a doubt, I think Season 2 is one of the most passionate pieces of animation I have personally seen. There's no way you get a production committee to allow something like this where you sacrifice commercial breaks to have extra minutes in the episode unless everyone involved really cares about this material, and I don't think the author's going to be complaining about how they handled Season 2 if I'm being honest. This episode, from the fights, which were easily the best fights we've seen in Re:Zero, we get the whole mansion fight, as well as we also get a pretty good taste of what was happening with Roswell versus Ram and Puck, and to see the actual tome get burned as Ram gets obliterated away. Do I think Ram's dead? Who knows? I mean, to have a casualty of some sort wouldn't be surprising, even though most of this loop has gone well. At the same time, Ram's a pretty formidable foe, so maybe she's gonna get out there with only losing an arm or something. It's hard to say, but it does feel like when one nightmare ends, another begins, and while I don't think necessarily the Roswell stuff or even the overall like mansion content, I don't think that's where the nightmare is starting. It's the freezing. It feels like what is the true last opponent is the freezing and the bunnies. I thought unless Roswell was there, it wasn't going to happen, but yeah, I mean, to see Amelia conquer that last trial and just walk out to the worst scene possible, we really have to succeed with Roswell here, and we really have to finish up the mansion, because everything else feels like we're on track to success. But it feels like unless Roswell helps, who knows what's going to happen here. But at the same time, with that book no longer keeping him in the past, will he protect Amelia? It's hard to say. But I really appreciated how much action there was, but also how much downtime. You start with great amount of action to the trial, and then finish up with just a shit ton of action that still tells stories along the line. I think the trial was especially interesting because we knew she was going to complete it. There was no way she wouldn't, but to see one of the possible futures, which is just so hellforsaken, to end in the tea party and how she doesn't feel hateful or resentful or anything. She's just feels like, you know, economics kind of mean. It really does feel like someone like Subaru has really rubbed off on Amelia in a positive way, and the way she's been able to grow over these trials, especially considering how she used to tackle the trials in the first part and everything like that, to see Amelia's growth is exceptionally strong, and to see that hug towards the end, I thought just kind of brought it all together, to then seeing Ekidana's grave by the looks of it, and how it was such a beautiful but also sort of sad scene, and you can kind of understand why someone like Roswell was so bound and bent on keeping that active, if that was any sort of way of like preserving the body or something. At least that's kind of what it felt like, because if you crack it, does the body just kind of disintegrate? It's hard to say, right? Because there's so much magical things happening in the world of Re:Zero that you don't know. When cracking a case that has this kind of like angelic tree coming out, what does that do besides bring down a barrier? Though I really have to say the Roswell versus Ram and Puck situation was really interesting. Generally, I think what authors would do with the whole, like, I love you scene would be like Roswell would just drop his guard and say, you know what, Ram, my love's gone, but maybe I could love you. Instead, the whole I love you was literally Ram just saying, like, the reason I'm doing this is because I love you. Maybe at first I hated you because of what you did to my village, but there's always been a consistent feeling that I've had between Ram and Roswell, is that Ram is kind of like dedicated to Roswell, and it was pretty much heavily implied that she had romantic feelings for him, if not very strong, just emotional ones. So to have her like fully admit that, but not have it just be like he drops his guard, he's very distraught about it, because he's not going to be like Subaru who gives into just a simple I love you and that changes the course of everything. No, he's still fighting, but the fact that Ram was kind of like this martyr and this sacrifice, just getting it off her chest as she steals the one thing that is kind of holding him down and burns it, even at the cost of potentially her own life. I think that was a great way to show you that we needed that moment so he understood her true feelings, and it gave enough of a kind of like buzz around the head to say like, why would she say that, enough to drop his guard without making him stupid and say, you know what, this changes my entire course of actions. We know how devoted he is and how kind of indoctrinated he is to Ekidana. This was the perfect way to overcome it. And when you first see Puck kind of like start to get really big, I was like, okay, if Puck's in like true monstrous form, it's game over, because there's only a select handful of characters who would be able to beat that. But to just see like a giant Puck, I was like, okay, of course we're not going to get full-on catastrophe, but still, it's pretty badass. And I'm really going to be excited to see what the aftermath of Roswell will be, because with that book destroyed, what will the objective be? Will he just give up and wait to see what happens in the loop, or is something completely different going to happen? Because it almost feels like unless Roswell gets to Amelia, how is she going to survive the bunnies and the winter catastrophe? Hard to say. But the entire fight with Garf and Elsa I thought was great. I wasn't worried in the slightest with that fight. I said it, I think I mentioned it in last week's review, how I wasn't really overly worried with the whole fight because it felt like this was the moment that we would succeed. How do you go back? Like, there's no way. Like, with the contract kind of made that's binding both Subaru as well as, obviously, Roswell, whoever wins this loop wins the loop. Like, there is ways, obviously, to write it like Roswell controlling Subaru in different, like, realities and things, but still, it feels like this is the loop that we have to win, even if there's going to be some sacrifice. So the only way for this to succeed is for probably Garf to beat Elsa and things like that. And to just get like the casual like lore and character building for a character like her, the fact that there was a witch who was a vampire, and the fact that that vampire is dead means you can kill someone like Elsa. What I really appreciate is like, especially what they did with someone like Beetlejuice, right? You know, we get that great characterization to show what led him to become crazy. And here, even though it's not as fleshed out, the idea that she's been someone who's been so enthralled by body parts and ripping them out, the bowel hunter. And the fact that we get this casual, like, backstory to say, like, when she was very young, she almost got horribly violated by a man and she killed him, and the warmth of his body in this freezing cold made her kind of indoctrinated to ripping people apart. It's the little things that put into perspective why a character became a lunatic without necessarily excusing their lunatic overall actions. And I think that was a great way while seeing just some gorgeous fight. Like, I really appreciate how the action in this show isn't static. It's not just punch, because usually when you have these action scenes, you get good impact, but nothing surrounding the overall impact is all that interesting. But the camera is constantly bouncing as if you're a GoPro attached to the shoulders of these characters. The GoPro's like 6 feet away from them, and it's just really interesting seeing how fluid and fast and vibrant it is. And the destruction and everything was great. I mean, just the transformations, the sisters, and just it actually felt like there was connections both with Garf and his sister as well as Elsa and what she considers her sister. It's just a great scene overall, and it just felt like we were witnessing the best action, both visually, but also with the narrative between what the characters are fighting for. Garf believing that you can throw as many mob beasts as you want at my boy, but my boy's gonna always survive, and really Subaru's just running for his life because it's all he can do, as other characters are burning these creatures alive. It felt like every character had a story and why they're fighting, so the action wasn't there just to be a visual spectacle, it was also there to serve a purpose for the narrative, and crazy lunatics trying to cut you apart and rip open your bowels actually had some significance in terms of why they like to do that, just past being a psychotic bitch. It was just a great episode. It feels like ReZero always has the best episode week after week, and I don't think there's been a dip in season 2, and part 2 has definitely just elevated the quality. I'm really excited to see where the final stretch is going to go. It feels like we have to succeed here, but it does feel like there's costs, and it feels like, you know, even if every character technically gets out of this alive, there's battle scars here, there's emotional scars, and it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen next. But at the very least, Rock Piggy did get crushed in a pretty brutal fashion, as did Elsa, and that was kind of amazing. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. What did you think, and where do you think it might go with next week's episode? If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you're happy and new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.